Welcome back, everyone, to the things we know. I'm I don't want to say I'm excited about this episode, but we've been having this conversation offline, and so it's good to just record it and commit it to commit it to the episodes,
To history.
to history. I've been calling for months now this moment in time like some misogyny renaissance, and not that it ever went away. It just feels really out in the open and blatant and flagrant. It just feels like we've been seeing so many of the old tropes about women, unbelievably, you know, um, just the way people don't want to believe them. They're quick to, assume malintent. There's a lot of suspicion and backlash, and it's just roaring back, even after all the progress we thought we'd made. And obviously, having a female candidate again always brings that stuff forward. We start to see that, and we've done episodes on this before, just about how women are treated differently in the media. So, there's a lot of things going on outside of even politics, that are causing you and I and our queens, thread with Melissa Kelly and Elijah Selby, who are both incredible feminist goddesses. But that we've been discussing this, like why do people hate women?
I mean, yeah, so today this is really born out of, you're right. We've been having this conversation since the day after the election. We had, pre the election, we had our misogyny episode. Elijah then had us back on her businesses activism pod to talk about it right after the election. We were reflecting on it for sure through that lens of, and we never really talked about this, but that whole lens of like Kamala slept her way into her success.
Jeez.
Trump is actually convicted of rape, but she slept her way into her success. I mean, so we've been having this
Yes.
conversation for a while. That being said, this
Technically,
really
he was convicted of sexual assault, but
that's right.
yes,
You're
yes.
right. I don't want to be George Stephanopoulos. But I mean, come on. Jean Carroll
Yes.
has had her day in
Hmm.
court and she has shown him to be who he is. And yet people are worried about whatever they perceive VP Harris had done to become a senator and then a vice president
Yes.
and then a presidential candidate. It's like the hypocrisy is beyond thick.
Mhm.
However, this topic really was born out of the Blake Lively, Justin
Yeah.
Baldini issue.
So
Kate
let's,
Beckinsale. Yeah. So
yes,
why
let's
don't
start there.
yeah, let's start there. Can you sort of sum it up a little bit?
A little bit, yes, because and I noticed it right away, not because I was a big fan of any of these people, or the movie. Um, um, it ends with us, not against it, just wasn't really following all that. However, Um, Elijah made me aware of a podcast that I had been following called Man Enough, and it was started by Justin Baldoni, an actor who's now a director, who was getting a lot of parts of being a smarmy dude, and did a TED talk called like "Can we be man enough to stand up for women?" Right? Can we be a lot more feminist in the ways we relate to women in the world? And he started this with his best friend, who I know very little about, Jamie Heath. I mean, almost next to nothing, and Liz Plank, who is a known and published writer, and feminist thought leader. So I noticed this because I follow him and believed
Mm-hmm.
him to be somebody who was intentionally, maybe he's not exactly like I'm not like his hugest fan, but I was believed him to be someone who was intentionally trying to battle the misogyny, that's out there, and be a different kind of man, right? A different kind of masculinity, promote that. So that's what's fascinating about all this. That's an aside.
Mm-hmm.
This lawsuit, um, is interesting because it came out of nowhere when we thought like what was happening last summer when the movie came out was people were noticing that Blake Lively and the rest of the cast, including the author of the book that it's based on, um, they were on a press promotion tour that was separate from him. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was a lot of buzz if you looked at it that was like, what happened there? People picked up on some division there. and who was not following who anymore. It's always so funny that people notice it, but then it ends up sometimes becoming a whole thing.
Yeah.
So that sort of died down. But what was happening back then got into permeated everyone's consciousness. Whether or not you were a fan of Blake Lively, she wasn't looking too good. There were like
Right.
all these old videos of her not being very nice to reporters, or surfacing stories of her being a bit of a mean girl on set or a bit of a diva. Those were all happening. And it looked like he was promoting the movie with just all the seriousness that domestic violence requires, where it was showing that she was promoting, a more lighthearted version of like, wear your florals and like, this is a rom-com kind of thing. And so she's got vilified by fans, and the press kind of it seemed to help make that happen. So there was all that, and it sort of died down. What happened, I think December 20th, I believe, is she filed, I believe that's when not that it matters, but she filed a civil suit against him, alleging sexual harassment, with proof that through some text messages that were mysteriously obtained, proof that he had hired a PR firm to quote unquote help, bury her and protect him from what he perceived was maybe going to be an attack on his character. Maybe the fact that she had alleged some sexual harassment on set, with just the way he ran the set and the way he made her uncomfortable. This is conjecture on my part. He was afraid that was going to come to light. I'm not sure. But that seems to be the
Well, I
basis
mean, it
of her
totally goes
lawsuit.
against the brand that he
Right,
was
right,
promoting, right?
right.
That he's
So,
a reformed,
right.
bad boy and all of this.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, in like when that story of that broke, people were like, wow. And including you and I and Elijah, we were texting like, wow, first of all, we didn't want to believe it because, he's part of this podcast that's promoting all this, you know, um, feminist ideology. Liz Plank walked away from the podcast, and her quote was, "We all deserve better," right? Something like that. But so this was all kind of happening while we were realizing, oh, we totally bought into that, and you don't. And here's the thing: we kept saying to each other, "You don't have to even like her to believe her. Why didn't like, you know, she's bringing forth another side of the story. It's believable." And it made us kind of step back and go, God, just once again, this happened. It was so easy to create a narrative that like ruined her reputation. And now he's obviously got a countersuit saying that like this is all contrived on her part to repair her reputation. But she also had some receipts. So
Yeah.
anyway, is that a good
Yeah,
summary?
no, that's perfect. And the thing that's so interesting for me, and again, you and I and Elijah, just we happened to have a Zoom like catch up that day that we were talking about all of this, um, is I knew nothing of him. I knew nothing of this podcast. I saw what I guess now I realize was the plot to take her down with this PR. I mean, really a legitimate smear campaign. And because again, like you, I'm not that familiar with her. I didn't watch Gossip Girl. I basically know her
I didn't
from,
either.
one or two movies and her marriage to Ryan Reynolds. I just don't follow them. They're not in my worldview. But when it all happened, yeah, there was this sense of, oh yeah, I've heard that about her. Oh yeah, I've heard that, and so you just sort of fall, and of course doesn't hurt that he is conventionally a good-looking man, and if he's got this backstory of like being reformed and a male feminist, which you could also just call a feminist. There is there was all that. So when this second half came out, there was this conversation between the three of us where you guys were it was fascinating because you two were kind of trying to reconcile what you knew about him to this. Like, how did he do this? And I was just like, it sounds like he was never reformed, that was an act,
Exactly.
um, and I'm not gonna lie, it was like kind of sad and painful to watch you guys like kind of figure out how this all happened. And I don't mean that demeaningly, but because I had no horse in the race, you guys were trying to like, but he said this and he said that, and I was just like, I don't think he meant it. So I
Yeah.
just didn't have the same. I didn't have the same feelings about
I think
him.
Elijah and I were at sort of at different stages of that because she
Yes.
was. I think I was like I believe that people can kind of have an intention to do better and be better, and then get put in a setting
Right.
where you find out how much that took.
Yeah.
Like how much that like you can when you're in a situation, and this is my guess, where your ego gets challenged, you can revert back to old ways to fight your way out of that, right?
But
So
then
I
own, and you said this
but so
though,
it shows who
own
you really
that.
are.
Own
Own
that
it.
piece of it, right? Because
Right. Like that would have been the feminist thing to do, right? Is go, whoa, I got called out for some old behavior that I thought I had not, like I had really exhumed, and
correct.
here I was again, and I want to tell this story, not go hire a PR firm to
Yes.
protect you.
Yeah. Totally.
I
And
mean,
my
obviously, his countersuit is alleging all this stuff that's going to be interesting to watch, and no matter how this all turns out,
right.
I think that the topic we want to bring to here, and then obviously Kate Beckinsale and a lot of female actors have come out and said have shared very similar things to these subtle things on set that are so unsupportive of women, that make women uncomfortable, that they have just continued to put up with to keep their jobs and to be able to grow in this business is exhausting, and the reason they don't speak up is because of shit like this.
Well, I said before we started recording, this absolutely takes me back to 2017 and Me Too. I mean, it takes everybody back, but in 2017, when all of this, it was October, I remember it as clear as day. Charlotte had just started acting. So she was 11 and she had just started going to an acting class and was really loving it. And I remember, it's like, it's one of those things that sounds so ridiculous, but it's like burned into my memory. I remember standing watching the Today Show with Matt Lauer, which in and of itself is hilarious, and thinking to myself, shit, okay, we can get her out of these classes. She doesn't have to be an actress. Well, that's fine. We're just not going to do this because I just thought, oh my God, and now here we are again. And right before we started recording, I went into Charlotte because I just watched the full Kate Beckinsale reel. And I was like, are you sure you don't want to be an accountant? Because I was like, and even over the holidays, Liam and I were sitting talking about different things. And I said, he said something about he didn't want to gender situations. And I said, I don't want to gender it either, except I have to be honest. I worry about Charlotte, especially in that they're both artists. I worry about her in a way I would never worry about Liam, even if he was an actor. And because she's so young and all of her experience, I mean, yes, she's been on sets, but she was a child background actor. Like I was on set with her all the time. Um, so that was never an issue. But as she's gotten older, it's all been her directors have been her teachers. And so she's not run into this. But now, as her band is starting to play out, the Deaf Aids, and we were recently watching one of the bars that they play at. They live stream the show, which we didn't realize until recently, and you can go back and rewatch it. And so they were watching it, the girls were, and they were watching the comments, and it was all men. And this happened to be a show where they had some technical difficulties, so they were having a little bit more banter than they needed to. But one of the comments rolls by and it says, "This would be a lot better if the lead singer would just show her tits." Yeah, I hadn't told you that. I wanted to see what your reaction was going to be. Yeah, so that was Charlotte. Yeah. And I was
Gross.
like, okay.
I mean, that is disgusting and pisses me off.
I know it
Especially because
does.
the whole spirit of these
Of the
shows
band,
is
yeah.
the feminine energy, right?
Yep,
For
my
sure.
shirt.
Um, Come on. So, I mean, what I also want to I want to go back to Kate Beckinsale's thing, but
Mm.
going back to some of the things that were alleged in this 80-page suit was, and even if they're taken out of context, which is what the countersuit says, there's a lot of things there that people have just had to put up with. But him holding up production, crying because fans said she looked too old or gained too much weight in her pregnancy. She was 4 months after giving birth to her fourth child, and she felt fat shamed in the way he was talking to her trainer about how much she weighed because he was going to have to lift her. And These are little microaggressions that
Yep.
women have lived within this business for so long, not feeling like her privacy was respected, not having any, control over things that were being shown to her in discussions about pornography and sex. These things that, we've been told for decades, like just
Boys will
man,
be boys.
I've talked about that here, that when I got a restaurant job, I just had to like start acting like I didn't hear that shit. Like that, it's where people probably get an airhead persona, because they act like they didn't hear it so they can just do
Yeah.
their job. I heard all that shit. It was gross and inappropriate, and I just didn't give it any attention. Um, that's what women have had to do for so long. And that was her description. So you just watched the Kate Beckinsale. Do you want to share a little bit about what she was?
Yeah. And yes, I'll share that and say also, and what men don't understand, because I can guarantee you, any woman that is listening to this episode right now, even if they didn't realize it at the time, they might realize it as they're listening, right? Oh shit, yeah, that happened to me. Oh shit. I mean, that's why it's hashtag me too, you know,
Mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm.
is that the energy that it takes to ignore it is huge. You think, oh, just ignore it, just ignore it. No, because it still goes in your brain, it still goes in your ear holes. You feel it in your body when
And
you are
you start to like incorporate it.
absolutely,
It's
absolutely,
internalized. You start to think
absolutely.
that way and look at other women that way. Yes.
Well, and that's just, and yes, and we'll talk about that here in a second too. Yeah, so Kate Beckinsale's was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
She came on. She said, of course, she wasn't on the set. She's not in the movie. She doesn't know, was not there to witness any of this. But listening and reading to what she has seen, as again, every woman, if you watch this, and we'll put it in our stories. Um, she was also fat shamed. She said she's been on two movies where she had to lose so much weight that she stopped having her period. That's a lot of weight. To stop having your period, that is, you are very, very thin when you don't have your period. I mean, that happens to like athletes, you know. She also said she was on a movie once where the actor was drinking, and so they would wait 6 hours for him to learn his lines. And she's like, I feel for him. He was obviously going through something, but that meant all the entire cast had to sit there, and crew had to sit there and wait for him to be ready, and that meant she didn't get home to her daughter. You know, she every time she would bring something up like this, you know, she would be called a cunt, she would be called a bitch, she would be blacklisted. She's and this I thought was interesting, but again, I think it speaks to how women manage it for themselves. She said, you know, there was a episode when she was 18 where she got felt up by somebody. She didn't say whether it was an actor or a director or a producer, but she got felt up by somebody who was she respected and cared for, and went to an actress on the set who is known to be very supportive of women, and the actress said, no, you didn't. She went to somebody else on the crew. No, you didn't. So she's like, so I was gaslit. So then again, I've been gaslit. It makes you feel crazy. You start thinking
Mm-hmm.
that you are making this shit up, you know, and
You're too sensitive and you
you're
need
too
to just,
sensitive. You're too
yeah.
emotional. And it's like, fuck, it is happening. Stop, stop. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's just a million different. But I get it. Again, if you are in a situation, especially as an actress or an actor, you this is your dream life. You're living your dream, and you know that anything you do could put you. She talked about how she never, lucky for her, had to witness any body parts from Harvey Weinstein, but she had turned down roles to his movies, and she said he actively would call other producers and directors and say, "Don't work with me, don't work with her, Kate Beckinsale."
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, so it's this. I wonder if this will be Me Too Part Two, in a
Yeah.
fact of like, if more and more actors, and I say actors as women, um, start to share their stories like Me Too. That's how that gained traction. You know, if more and more women say, "Oh yeah, I went through this," you know, Amber Heard came out. You know, and that Amber Heard Johnny Depp situation was a mess, no
I think
question.
he prevailed. I mean, and she
Ultimately, I think he did because he's the bigger guy, he's the bigger star, and so she got put in her place. But he hired the same PR company as Justin Baldini. So, and we haven't talked
Baldoni, but Baldoni.
whatever. Yeah, he doesn't deserve his name to be named Baldoni. You're right. Thank you. But what we haven't mentioned is the person who runs that PR company is
Is a woman.
a
Yeah,
woman.
right. And yeah, I mean, and Amber Heard also came out and supported Blake Lively, which was really
Oh yeah.
charitable of her, considering she didn't get her day.
Mm-mm.
Why that just leads me right into what we want to say next, which is why do we jump so fast to villainize the women? And honestly, I wasn't paying attention to it. I wasn't, you and I never talked about it.
Nope.
But this just reminds me, and like totally separate from this, like media has such an influence in how people think. I just came across accidentally and didn't even go deep into it, this realization that like the John Benet Ramsey case, like the parents and the brother were totally, exonerated.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, there was ick around that. Like the
Right.
family did it because of the newsstands, because of media and like the way they got into our brains. Like it wasn't social media back then, it was, the tabloids.
Right.
But I totally had this sense that like Lively wasn't easy to work with. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I believed it and went around saying that, but like it was
Well, it's because
getting
it didn't
in
matter
the
to us.
right, it didn't matter. So the whole point is like why are we so fast to villainize them? Like this mean girl trope, people hear of conflict. Like you think about Katherine Heigl, Sean Young, we were talking about this the
Yep.
other
We talked
day. The
about Sean. Yeah.
reason people like Kate Beckinsale don't speak up is because they want people to want to work with them. So
Yep.
and these old I like knee-jerk reactions, like she's probably overreacting, she's out for attention, she's a diva, and PR teams play into it and they make their money off of it. They know that painting a woman is difficult is a go-to strategy. Enter this female-run PR firm, and it sounds like it's a whole cat fight there that created all of this. Like these competing PR firms, like where these two are breaking apart or something, and
Ah,
that's why they handed over all these texts. That's just
interesting.
sad
Oh,
too.
that's
Like
interesting.
there's just a whole thing, and they've made tons of money,
I mean, I have a
burying
hot
Amber
take.
Heard. Yeah.
Uh, even the apple.
Mm,
I mean, this has been going on since the Bible was written.
that's true.
Eve and the apple. Eve was the one that put us here on this earth, who created original sin, not Adam. Are you fucking
No,
kidding me?
because you're human. You gave into temptation, but the
Right. Right.
temptress.
But
Oh,
the woman did, right? So I mean,
right.
this literally is a tale as old as time. And there's just these moments, while there is a misogyny renaissance. There's no question, from the day that VP Harris conceded to Trump, we were watching Nick Fuentes, Your Body, My
Mm.
Choice. I got a death threat over Facebook, or at least a wish that I would be dead because I was a liberal cunt. Like this is, it is the counterweight, I think, to what is about to
Yeah,
enter into the White House. We are both
yeah.
seeing this absolute rise of re-rise of not great men.
Mm.
You have this in here. There's going to be no committees in the
Hmm.
Senate and Congress with a woman heading it for the first time in, I don't
It's
know,
definitely true of the House. It's probably true of Senate too. Definitely true of that. For the first time in 20 years,
20
there
years.
will be no females leading any. Like we have gone backwards.
100%. And yet here's that little bright light. Here's that little step forward that now women are going, oh hell no. I am not going to stand for this anymore. I hope. I, I want to say I hope it changes things, but again, Harvey Weinstein was 7 years ago. This movie was filmed a year ago.
No, I don't want to be like dark or bleak or hopeless. I never am. I do believe that
That's my job.
we've overcome. Well, true. I mean, I was just thinking when you were saying that, like, on balance, both extremes, extreme left and extreme right, make threats, and they do some horrible things in response to like somebody trying to make a difference. The the thing I'm afraid of, because I'm liberal, is that like we have just gone backwards. We are putting people in leadership who don't even believe women should be in combat, who have consistently gotten away with assaulting women, and then they, get given even more power. Um, so it's a hard time to believe that like we can keep advancing. It's just
Yeah.
exhausting. Like, our grandmothers, not quite grandmothers, but yeah, some of them are grandmothers. They fought for this shit, and we've gone backwards. So I don't know. I'm. It's going to be interesting to see what's playing out in Hollywood right now and the attention this is getting, where that goes, if anywhere, politically, and if it makes a difference. And like maybe that's the good here. Maybe it's happening to get attention so people don't just give up everything and go, okay, come on, what can we agree to is that we want for our daughters? I don't have an actual daughter, but what can we, our daughters as a society, what can we
Yeah.
agree to is decent human behavior and safety in the workplace? What can we agree to in media that's gone way overboard? This whole idea that women are burying other women and they can just go to these lazy tropes to just end somebody's career because we're all so programmed to believe it. So it's so glad that people are speaking up, because we need somewhere, if not in politics, if not in real life, we need some industry where that's happening to keep this conversation going.
Well, and because Me Too did start in Hollywood as well and trickle down to every industry, I mean, I think we talked about this last season when Darren and I were looking over the quote unquote highlights of her suit, and one of the things you briefly touched on it was that she was being shown porn on, like, the phone was being handed to her and there was porn. That happened to my mom in the 90s. She worked
Mhm.
for a aerospace company, and her boss would call her in to show her something on the computer, and when she walked around his desk, it was porn. So there, I guess I'm not trying to be, I'm just like, oh, I'm not trying to be hopeless, but I'm also very much a realist and pragmatic. And so I want us to look at every one of these experiences where women speak out as a step forward, even if it's an itty bitty step, and realize that this is so baked into the world, to religion, to everything, that a few people coming out and speaking out is not going to be the thing that just shifts the world, right? Just like Obama being president didn't get rid of racism. It
Mm.
doesn't change anything. It does change things, but it's such a small drip. So I want to be hopeful in that these drips are still happening, and recognizing that I don't know that you and I in our lifetime are going to see a massive shift. Um, because again, it's like I think about, uh, I can't think of it now. I'm having a brain fart. Gun control. You think if kindergartners can be killed and we don't change our gun laws, what's going to do it? I feel the same thing about Harvey Weinstein. Like, if if there was such a massive, like, all the men that got taken down by that, and this movie was made a year and a half ago, like, what? It didn't change anything, except that it made it a little, I'm sure she agonized over doing this, but it made it possible for her to speak out because she wasn't the first. The women of Me Too were the first. So
Yeah.
hopefully it opens up the door to make it slightly, quote unquote, easier to walk through to call this stuff out. But to think that calling this out is going to make a huge shift, probably not, especially as we enter into a time here in America where we are being shown constantly that women do not matter at the very highest levels of our government.
Right. And I want to go back to this pornography thing, because just more than I was interested just to discuss this on this episode, I read a little bit more about the nature of those things and whether or not they agree it was pornography. And one of the cases that, not Justin, but the other producer, was
Yeah.
showing her, without her permission, a video of his wife giving birth. And their defense is that isn't pornography. And what all these subtleties like keep reminding me of is these directors were imposing the male gaze on what they thought should be sexy, what they thought, oh, well, this is what my wife did. Well, my wife and I climax at the same time. This is disgusting things that like
Yeah.
that women have to constantly be subjected to. And then they're defending it, right? So even if it wasn't actual pornography, it made her uncomfortable and it wasn't true. Like, not every woman gives birth completely naked. Many women are wearing t-shirts, tank tops, and the stupid gowns they give us. Like there's not like there's just such a male gaze. Oh, you're overreacting, or oh, you're not as much of a woman as my wife, kind of thing. Like there's just this bullshit, subtle stuff that maybe there isn't a law around, but listen to that. Listen to the story being woven together here. Like so many people were so uncomfortable that they had to have a
Yeah.
meeting, that they didn't want to be associated with them anymore. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but like, there's the other thing is that wasn't like it's gaslighting. That wasn't that.
Right.
It's this. Like it is this another way of saying you're being too sensitive. You're not professional enough. My silly screen doing weird things. It's just I'm exhausted by it, and we grew up with that. Like when I had the audacity to call people out, they would then qualify what they were about to say and still say it. They go, "You're not going
Yep.
to like this, but," and then say
Yep.
something misogynistic and like roll their eyes and sort of laugh at themselves and keep doing it. Carrie, don't say this around Carrie, but da, 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 so it was like,
Yep.
oh, so you're still doing it and then mocking me as a problem
Right.
instead of not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
that's such a good point. Such a good
this is
point.
ridiculous. It's like this, oh, everybody's so sensitive. It's like, no, this is fucked up behavior. And I'm glad it's getting called out. And so I guess to your point, yes, it gives me hope that like another wave of Me Too, that there's a conversation going in a national climate of shushing people and misogyny reigning supreme.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's again, we had this conversation when we were talking back when this all went down and because you made the comment of the ego piece. And you know what? Maybe this isn't his maybe this isn't what he's supposed to be doing because you and I and many of our women friends have are married to men who are married to strong women and they don't resort to this shit. So I want to turn the tables and be like, maybe you're too sensitive, Justin Baldoni.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't what you should be doing because you can't handle it. If you are around a woman who is going to call you out on your shit, maybe you need to find a new job. Maybe you need to be blacklisted.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
Yeah.
this is not boys just being boys. This is not oh, it's just Hollywood. This shit happens all the time.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't happen with a lot of men. And I'm not doing the old trope of not all men. God knows. I mean, we haven't even talked about the woman from France and
I
the
know.
man who, yeah, that's a
That's
whole
a whole
nother shit show.
episode.
But I mean, that's again, you can go down that not all men road all you want. But when your husband is drugging you and having 70 of his friends from all different sort of walks of life come in and rape you, I mean, it could be all men.
It could feel that way for, yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is we hear that all the time, like with not all men. Instead of responding with not all men or that wasn't porn, you say, I'm really sorry that's happening for you. I'm really, really sorry that that's what's causing you pain or that it landed that way for you. I'm so sorry that's your experience.
And
You don't
again,
have
if
to
he was
defend
a ref,
men. Your
if,
your your attention needs to be on the person who's expressing their pain.
and again, it does remind me once again of the Me Too, like all the people that got canceled. I'm thinking of like Louis C.K. and obviously Matt Lauer, but who never once said, you know what, I fucked up, and instead slinked away. Try every once in a while tries to slink back in, and public luckily still goes, oh hell no. But you know, if he was a reformed lech, and now he was a feminist, all he needed to do was say, oh my God, you're right. I am so sorry. I clearly have more work to do. My bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
instead of me, woe's me. I mean,
Your husband was mean to me. Yeah.
yeah, your husband, yeah, that came out right before we started recording this, that he's all mad at Ryan Reynolds now. Oh,
I
give me
mean,
a fucking break.
back to your point, like I think cultural change just isn't a straight line. We know this
Mm-mm.
in our 50 years, 50, almost 56 years.
56, we're almost
We
56.
we expand awareness and then we see backlash.
Yep.
I felt like we were really going to make massive change with this election. And I'm not going to go right there. But anyway, we see backlash. People protect what they have.
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with like the whole MAGA thing. Like when people feel like their way of believing or living is threatened, they go back. And guess what? Because you always had the power, you just go back and like hold on to it. I've said so many times, like I've never felt as a feminist like women are trying to get rid of men. We're all just trying to share power with everybody so that everyone has a voice. And that for some reason that's threatening. At least stories like this aren't confined to hush hush conversations in corners.
Yes.
They're out in the mainstream. The media is covering it. Social media can bury someone, but it can also expose truth. And I think it's really hard to know what to believe. I think there's a countersuit now that's just going to go right back to making her look calculated and powerful and A-list couple being mean. And it's going to be fascinating to watch this play out. I think it's really, really important to go to exactly what you said. What do we know is true as women? What have we seen over and over again? Kate Beckinsale and Blake Lively, you don't have to like them or even be. I barely know Kate Beckinsale. I think it was really brave of her to admit that she just state. I mean, Gal Gadot said something recently too, and she got a ton of backlash for it. Like the things they went along with
Yeah.
because they wanted their job,
Yeah.
and we can't celebrate that and cheer them on and then vilify them for going along with it. And that is just as that is the path that women take, and that's why so many don't speak out.
Yeah, and right, and absolutely, and if you've experienced this and you haven't spoken out, I believe you as well. We believe you as well. We believe that you did what felt best for you in that moment. Um, my mom didn't. My mom told us years and years, years, years later. She didn't go to anybody. She didn't say anything. I remember her so distinctly saying at when she told the story because I think at the time my sister and I were like, "What the fuck did you say anything to anybody?" And she was like, "I knew he was retiring. I just thought I'm going to hold on until he
Mhm.
leaves."
Mhm.
Um, and so if there's an opportunity to speak out, but there's also the aspect of having to relive it all. Kate
Mhm.
Beckinsale's telling stories from when she was 18. Every
Yeah.
time this happens, any woman that's been a victim of this has to relive all these memories. I remember that with Me Too as well, like women being like, oh my God, I don't have to say this all over again. I don't want to get on the stand and talk about this. I don't want to have to relive this experience. You are being re-victimized, and I use that term in a way that like I don't
Yeah.
want any woman to feel like a victim. If they've lived through it, they've survived it. But it's you have it all comes back up. All those feelings in your body, the pins, your whole skin being fire and pins, like all of that stuff. So like we always say, do what feels best to you. But I think the bottom line is, and it's certainly been my takeaway from this experience, is I like with Me Too, where I'm not going to just assume that she's lying. When I see a smear campaign like this, I'm also not going to assume, even if I've
It's
heard
true.
rumblings that, oh, she is not great on set. Or I just look back. I mean, we talked about Sean Young because she was really saddled with that back in the day. And I think to myself, like, did she then live into that declaration of her? Like, did she decide, well,
I,
everybody thinks I'm a bitch, so I'm just going to be a bitch?
who even knows if she was? Who like maybe she did get her heart broken a couple of times by co-stars, and that was the story that was painted. Who knows?
Right.
Maybe because she was bold enough to like have an emotional outburst, which is fine. And
And
we
just because
vilify
they're
that over time.
celebrities, and I think
Yeah.
that's the other piece of it, just because they're celebrities and so many people, oh, who, they've got this cushy life. If you are being sexually harassed, it's not so fucking cushy. Doesn't matter whether
Right.
you're a podcaster or you are a stay-at-home mom or you are a celebrity walking the red carpet. The
No.
experience in your body is exactly the fucking same. And so
Uh,
don't blow it off because they're famous.
I was going to say too, just without getting into a whole other topic, one of the things I kept saying around the election was around the anti-choice rhetoric that was out there. It's like, okay, then what are you going to do about rape culture? Rape
Right.
culture that makes it like really like takes a victim who's been through something horrific that's almost worse than death and then make them relive it and make them defend it and make their behavior or their lack of safety be the issue. Why aren't we like what are we doing about the culture that makes it okay for men to treat women this way or like an object or to sexualize them, to abuse them, to assault them, and then elect them. So I think it all goes to that. Like we don't have the same. I mean, I think people are more outraged by somebody killing a CEO than they are by a serial rapist, and that's just weird.
No
And
question.
so anyway, so not to go so far into that, but it just speaks like it is a rape culture.
Yeah.
And that just speaks to, the misogyny out there and the things we're willing to believe and go to. And it is internalized.
I was just going
People
to
have
say,
so much more
again, the
fear.
PR company
Yeah,
was run by a woman. So
yeah,
misogyny is not just on men, it is
no,
also on women.
no. Yep. All right.
I need another
Speaking
sip
of
of this wine.
refusing to be silenced, because we were talking about that, our
Mm-hmm.
song of the week is Nightmare by Halsey. One of the many lines that stands out is no, I won't smile, but I'll show you my teeth, which I love. It perfectly captures that vibe of pushing back against a system that wants women to just grin and bear it and otherwise risk being a bitch.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna once again do a callback to Golden Child by Say Lulu. We
Mm.
did this. We used this as an honorable mention on Charlotte's pod, back Barbie in the Real World. But the lines are: they're gonna cut you to the core. They're gonna try to cool you down. They'll shame you when you flirt, but they'll hate it when you frown. They'll find a way to keep control. They'll try to own you with an ancient glance. They're gonna set you into stone, and then I bet they'll ask, "Why don't you dance?" And every time, like every hair on my arm is standing up when I read those lines. I mean, that song just kills me every time. And yeah, so I
Yep.
suspect this won't be the last time we have this conversation in
Nope.
season 3 or ever.
Yeah, and I just want us to stay vigilant and aware and just watch the political sphere where women's leadership roles are taking a hit and just
Yeah.
know that like it's an environment where old attitudes are getting newly emboldened. I think when people can get away with stuff the way a Matt Gates can, be vigilant, be watchful, and know that as many strides as we've made, the old attitudes are still there. And just question what you start to believe
Yeah.
is kind of my call to myself.
100%. I mean, I like I said, that was my biggest takeaway after our conversation almost a month ago, was, watch where women are fighting back. Yes, we are taking some steps back, no question. But watch where women are stepping up and stepping forward and calling other women in, with receipts and more of a collective voice. And just if I don't fault any of us for immediately going to believing what was came out first, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
because again, it is so baked into our world and our culture and our beliefs. However, when you find yourself immediately going to, oh wow, she must be a bitch, take a beat, do some research,
Mm.
ask yourself, why is that where I'm going? How do you know? Like Kate Beckinsale, we weren't on that set. We don't know, but don't just assume that what the man is saying is true.
Yeah, and if you don't have time to research or if you don't care, just go internal and turn off the switch that automatically believes stuff. Just go, wait, I'm starting to believe it, and what if it's not true? Neutralize it if you don't have time to actually go find out.
Love that.
Neutralize it. I
Yep.
think that's a great practice as well.
Yep. I
Um,
agree.
so thank you for listening and joining us for this conversation. You can tell we're heated, and this can go in many directions, and it will. So if you found this conversation interesting or meaningful, please share it with somebody, or drop us a line on our social pages. We're on Instagram and Facebook. And one
And
of them we're
TikTok.
on, and TikTok. That's right. We're there now. So let's keep the momentum going, even if it feels sometimes like we're swimming upstream. Until next time.
Thanks for listening.